presented regularly for us through the summer. We're now on to our second Tuesday of the month sessions, which we're planning for the rest of the year with David. He's going to give an update on whatever's new in the Microsoft world, or some aspects of it for the last month. But once he's done that, he's going to have a deep dive today into Excel's Power Query, and I'm sure it's features that we don't use anywhere near as much as we should do in managing data. So I'm sure David will be looking out for some wows as the afternoon goes by to see what's stimulating you. And if you have any questions as we go along, do pop them in the chat box. If they're pertinent as we're going through, I'll disturb David and read them out. Otherwise, I'll keep them to the end when we have time for a few questions then. So over to you, David. Thank you for joining us again this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Paul. Hello, everyone. I'm here from Cambodia. So let me share my screen. Yep. Great. So thank you to people who have filled this form in. So a lot of people spending a lot of time on Excel as expected. People have come to my other webinars, and people that are using copy and paste and formulas typically to clean up data. And most people say they've heard of Power Query, but never used it. So hopefully you will learn a few things from today. All right, so a little bit about me to start. So I work for my own company called Excel Consulting. We've done training for over 1,500 people. We've consulted with over 100 as well, lots of nonprofits. I have a YouTube channel under my name, David Benaim. So my YouTube channel uptake has been incredible, particularly in the last month. So please feel free to sign up. I think I'm on about 1,300 subscribers, but I was on about like 800 subscribers 2 months ago. And I love anything that's to do with speed up. And I think this is relevant for what today is. So you can follow me. As I said, I have YouTube. This is my email address. And I also have a Twitter handle @DaveBenaim, where I post a lot of stuff that's new in technology as well. All right, so 6 things today. We're going to kick off with what's new in technology. Then we're going to look at the problem with data cleanup, single table cleanup, combining tables, how to import from external, and then summarize what we've covered. And the way that I'm calling this is sort of data cleanup made fun, because once you get into Power Query, it becomes a little bit of a sort of fun puzzle with how you can use the tools to solve different things to clean up the data. And I'll show you a lot of examples on that. So let's kick off with what's new in tech. So let me do some demos, some very cool stuff, mostly in Excel this time, actually. But I'm going to show you some of this stuff. So here I am in Excel, and you now have a new function that just got released that's called stock history. I think a lot of accountants will really like this. So effectively, you can get the historical exchange rates or the historical stock prices of a certain currency every day from a specified start date to a specified end date. So this is the Apple stock history price. Let me build one for you with the USD GBP exchange rate. So what I can say is I can say equals stock history, and then what the stock is. So I can either click on this cell, or I can use speech marks and write USD GBP. When you are using text in Excel, make sure you use speech marks before and after. And then I have a few more things. So the ones with no square brackets are the ones that are compulsory. So it's just the first one and the second one. So the second one I will do, say, 5th of July 2018. And let me just, 2018. And I'm just going to close it there. says busy, which means it's fetching it, but eventually it will pull that up. And there you go. That's the historic close rate in all of these days. So as with my other webinars, if you like what you've seen, then type in wow in the chat box. If you think that is something that's really, really useful. Good, good. So that can work with any stock price, any stock ticker, or any currency pair. You have a few other things that you can do. So you can also do equals stock history. This time I'm just going to point to this cell. Start date, say 3rd, 4th, 2014. I can also put in my end date. So 6th, 10, 2016. Make sure that the end is after the start. You can specify your intervals, so daily, weekly, or monthly. Double click on that. Do you want headers? Normally, I like to have the header and sometimes the instrument and the header as well. And then you can choose from different things. So not only the close, but you can also get the open, the high, the low, and the volume. And you can specify which order you want things in. So I could, for example, click, I want first the high, then I can also just type 0, the date, then the volume, like that. Volume is not really applicable when it comes to stocks, to currency pairs, but with stocks you would get that. So here it's given me that in the title as well. And let's say that instead of pointing it there, I just point it here. There you go. Now it's given me the volume. Now this is pretty impressive stuff. Microsoft have worked hard on this. However, having said that, if you are going to really use this, Google Sheets has a function called Google Finance, which is basically the same thing, just honestly 10 times more powerful. And I've been using that for a long time. But kudos to Microsoft for launching this feature. So other things that we have.
David,
yes.
You are a big fan of Google Sheets. You're getting it in there already. So we need to assess what everybody else knows of Google Sheets. I saw that one slipped in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Google Sheets. There's a lot of stuff that I think it does better than Excel. And certainly for this stuff, actually Excel pretty much copied it, but didn't make it quite as sophisticated. All right, so some other new enhancements around data types. So you can, for example, write down, let me do this in a place with more room, like here. So USA, so we've had for a while the data types thing. Some people might not have seen it. It's a really, really cool feature. So here you can select stocks and get the current stock price or geography. So I'm going to do that with USA. And which one do I want? I'll take the United States of America. Select. Often it would just bring it for you. So what this is able to do is look up a lot of details about this country. So there you go. There's the flag. There's some other details, et cetera, et cetera. So you can, if you want to do a few new things that you can do before, you can extract the image. And then the image is actually in the cell. This is the first time in Excel's history that it can have an image inside a cell. Historically, images have always floated on something, but now it's actually in the cell. Some other things you can do is you can browse. So I can look for subdivisions, and I can now look at, well, let's see what's in New York. And here is a subdivision of New York and getting the details there. Or I can just, if I want to, I can even just extract the entire sort of nested array of all of these. And it would then give me this busy error like we saw with stock history. And now it gives me all of these. So these are all the states in the US, including some other non-states outside like Guam. And then once I have those, I can keep going. So I can say, well, what is the area of all of these places? What is the birth rate of all of these places? No, birth rate doesn't quite apply in most of them. but yeah, then it gives you the field error. So those are the enhancements that have come to data types. And data types, well, the first part of the enhancements. Let me show you the next ones. Data types also can now provide a way to link to your organizational data. So this actually comes from Power BI, as it says in the thing, powered by Power BI. So you can preset something in Power BI if you are using that organizationally, and then you can populate it and grab stuff in Excel. So I've preset a couple that I'm going to show you. I've written out some country names over here. And what I've done is I've created a Power BI data set that goes directly to COVID data. So if I click on that, this is going to give me the COVID-19 details as of today. So I can grab, for example, the number of cases. I can grab the deaths yesterday, the death rate, things like that. This is stuff that is reported. It comes from the Johns Hopkins website. I'm going to make a video soon where I showcase exactly how to do this sort of from start to end. But yeah, it's a really cool feature that could have a lot of potential. Think about having, your stocks, your inventory counts. You can just write the name of your inventory and then return the number on stock, the person who's the contact, the physical location of the inventory, things like that that can come with it. So that's another feature that I'm pretty excited about. But I have preset it up. It's not quite as easy to do as the data types that I showed you. All right, so that is Excel. A couple more things in Outlook. So, yeah, the daily briefing. So now Outlook automatically uses AI to send you this daily briefing here to say, hello, here are a few things that look like they're tasks, and you can click either they're done or they're not a task at all. So please contact this with your comments. That's not really a task, so I'm going to click not a task. Or this one might be something I can press done with. So this, I'd say in preview, it's not that great, but I think it does have potential for how it can be something that's quite useful. Another thing within Outlook, if you have a new meeting, you can go to Insert and you can do a poll. And this will actually create something using Microsoft Forms. So Forms was the software that I used to send you the poll at the beginning of this. But you can have this nested inside the email. You can put your question and have different options and tick multiple answers on off like that. And then other people can respond. So that's a couple of new Outlook things. Teams also has a couple of new enhancements. So you can now sort of pop out a chat window, for example, clicking this, and then it's a separate window. This feature has been said that it's coming to meetings very soon as well, but for now it's just for chats. Meetings have a few small enhancements. You have the raise hands feature that's been in Zoom and other things for a while. That's also now built into Teams. But what's pretty cool is actually the announcement that got made for Teams last week. So some pretty big stuff has just been announced for Teams, which is pretty revolutionary, actually. So instead of having this world of everyone having their virtual backgrounds, which is all well and good, Teams is now taking the next step. And it's actually envisaging a scenario where you can actually put everyone's faces inside this sort of auditorium setting. They've done a lot of research that apparently shows that people are a lot more engaged if they're in this kind of scenario. If you think about how Zoom works or how Teams or all of these traditionally work, you always have stuff around your face. So there's a big contrast often between what's behind you, even if you use a virtual background. Whereas here, you can really just focus on people's facial expressions. And it's a lot like living in the real world where you have one common background. So Microsoft are calling this Together Mode, and they're releasing a lot of things together with this. They are going to have not just the auditorium, but also sort of like cafes and sort of drink sessions and things like that. They're also going to have larger gallery views for up to 49 people, which Zoom has had for a while. And you can do a side-by-side view of presenting content as well. Another thing Zoom's had for a while. And video filters, so check that out. You can change the brightness, the contrast, things that you might do with your Instagram, you'll be able to do within Teams. A few extra things with messaging, some live reactions, again, something that certain Zoom things can do. PowerPoint Live coming to Teams. So PowerPoint Live, I briefly showcased in one of my previous sessions. So that's a really cool feature. Breakout rooms as well, something that Zoom's had for a while, but that's coming to Teams supposedly soon. New things in the whiteboard, possibly again bringing that up to the Zoom standards, and tasks. So tasks has been announced for a while. This is something I'm pretty excited for because right now the office infrastructure doesn't have a great coherent way to do tasks, but this is something that's coming soon. And yeah, there's just all sorts of new updates. It's insane how much got announced last week. So I'm really excited for that. A lot of these are supposedly coming between now and the end of August. So it's very, very soon as well. So yeah, if you like those, then type wow in the chat window.
David, it's Paul here. We have got a few wows coming up. There was a question just now from Satola regarding the formula of stock history and other formulas, and asking which version of Excel is that going to be available in? Is it only the very, very latest?
Yeah, so good question, Paul. So the way that Excel and PowerPoint and Word and Outlook does updates nowadays is instead of having one version every 3 years, like 2007, 2010, 13, etc., now you can have a subscription-based pricing, which allows you to get updates every month. So if I go to File and Account, this is how you can always see which version you have. For me, I have a subscription product. So that means that I get the new version being updated every month. I'm in version 2008, which means the year 2020, and 08 is the 8th month, which is August. So I get the pre-release version with the beta channel, which what I've shown, the stock history and the data types, these are only in the beta channel for now, which means they're not yet released for other people, but they should be released amongst everyone very, very soon. In any case, if you like getting all the new stuff, then you can sign up for the beta channel within the Microsoft websites. So yeah, that's what that's the version that it has. All of these updates will not come to Excel 2016-19. They'll only come to the subscription product. The Power BI one is even more complicated because that is only coming to E5 licensing. So yeah, that's what's been announced so far. Great. Is that okay? Any other follow-ups? A few wows. Good. I like that. So yeah, there's a couple more Power Query enhancements. So I will talk about those as I showcase Power Query. And this is what I showed in Teams and Outlook. All right, so let's get into the main topic for today, which is Power Query. So the problem. So bad raw data. Bad raw data can come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, multiple tabs. This is often not recommended because it's near impossible to analyze this in a succinct pivot table or chart. The external data report curse. So a lot of organizations, they use systems like SAP, Oracle, QuickBooks, even Facebook. You export data from a system and it often doesn't give you the output in a useful format. Things that are not very useful here are like sort of hidden rows and columns, maybe a title that doesn't necessarily go down in the same row, subtotals. These are very often that they accidentally lead to double counting as well. Or the semi-reports. This typically comes from multi-row headers, which should almost always be avoided. You know, this is using data that's already pivoted, where you have males, kids, adults total, females, kids, adults total, and then a total at the end. A lot of this will be difficult to analyze if you are just using the regular Excel and analytics tools. What's optimal for data setup is having values of one type in the same column. So one row for headers, unique header names, avoiding blanks. Now, yes, sometimes it's okay to have blanks, but they can be quite confusing because you don't know, does blank mean I haven't entered it yet, but I will enter it in future? Does it mean something that's not applicable? Does it mean something that I just don't know yet, or that I'm being lazy? It just leads to too much confusion that will then lead to errors later on. Avoid merge cells inside a table at all costs. Highly encourage that. And no subtotals. So subtotals, as I said, very often lead to double counting. But in the real world, we often have that messy kind of data. So Power Query is a way to go from any badly organized and badly shaped data to something that is the optimal. And that's what I'm going to demo today. Pivot tables is the goal when you're doing any kind of analysis. So something that has columns where every column is a different data type. And then you can get from something like this to a summary table where you can aggregate together the total sales by month, by country, etc., etc. So I will talk about data cleanup. I'm not mentioning human error. So if someone types in these three values, then unfortunately there's not that much the technology can do to fix it, although I will show you one thing later on. What I do recommend is if people do have data cleanup issues, use data validation in Excel. I can't recommend it enough. It is so, so, so valuable. And yeah, another Google Sheets feature that I love, data validation in Google Sheets is 10 times better than Excel. But Excel's is still pretty useful and mandatory. So dates should follow convention as well. So, you know, it's important to put things, it doesn't really matter if you're using the numerical split or the text split, as long as you have day, month, year, or month, day, year, and you're consistent. Otherwise, these two are obvious, but what is this? Is this the 7th of June, the 6th of July? I know the countries have their standards, but we often send spreadsheets between them, and there can be issues.
David, Paulie, could you just clarify, David, could you clarify what the data validation is?
Yeah, so data validation is a way to create, it's to stop users entering the wrong kind of data. So typically this could be drop-down lists. It's in the data tab, data validation here. You could have a list, a drop-down list, or a list of date, or a date value between two dates, or a number value. Highly recommend people using this. I don't want to spend too much time on it on this session, but it is, when I teach Excel, I always say it's not the most fun thing to teach, but it is probably the most important skill in Excel that people can learn if they are spending time cleaning up data. To not put the data in wrong the first time. Okay, so let's go into single table analysis first. Now there's a very angry panda. So one possible issue is data is pivoted. And this is a technical term for effectively the opposite of pivot tables for people that know what that is, where you've got, say, a country, and then you've got January, February, March, and one column for each month. Now, although it's very easy to get a total by month, it's not very easy from this data to get a total by country, because you need to add together this cell, plus this, plus this, plus this, and who knows what other rows are underneath as well. So this is not the optimal way to set up data. Instead, you should move it around so that it looks like this. you've got one column for country, one for month, and one for amount. So I'm using the PowerPoint morph technique that I love to very seamlessly go from slide to slide. I have a video on my YouTube channel if you want to learn how to do that. Just uploaded it last week. But yeah, going back to this, its raw data should be unpivoted. That looks like this. General mesh, sometimes you have data that looks like this, where you have some merged cells and some subtotals. You can use Power Query to apply a sequence of steps to first take out the subtotals, unmerge the cells, and then you can even say that, you know what, this is Europe, this is Asia, and fill it down like that. So let's go through those examples and actually showcase Power Query. So here in this spreadsheet, I have the super simple data set for Power Query. So here I have some things that I want to clean up, which is similar to the diagram I just showed you. Excel does not know that these three are related to Coca-Cola. This one's related to Apple, Facebook, Honda, etc. Also, I don't want these subtotals, and I don't want to keep my comments column because that's never going to be useful to analyze. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this data, and I'm going to go to the Data tab, and I can choose here from table or range. So this is going to launch the Power Query editor. It asks me to make the data into a table. I just press OK there. And then it opens up this new screen. And this is fantastic because this is a whole new screen that is not even Excel anymore. This is with 4 different tabs: Home, Transform, Add Column, and View tabs. And all of these features do not exist in the regular Excel. You cannot change any data here. You can only apply data transformation steps like this. There are a lot of data transformation steps you can apply. You even have a formula bar that uses a different formula language to the regular Excel called M code. So let's look up how to clean up this data. So a few things that we can do. Firstly, I want to tell Excel that this is Apple, this is Coca-Cola, these are Facebook. So every time there is a null value, I want it to fill down until it gets to the next gap. So you can select the column, go to Transform, Fill, and then down. And it does just that. Next, we can remove our totals, our subtotals. So we have filters over here that work very similarly to the rest of Excel. You can just click on the filter for the city, and I can choose Remove Empty, because that is where all the totals are, and it will remove all the totals like that. Best practice tip, you might have wondered, well, why don't I just filter it out here and remove total? You can do that, but the word total might not be exact. So sometimes it might be called subtotal or grand total, things like that. So I go for the remove empty just because that is always going to be exact. Just a good practice tip that people tend to use. Some other things you can do, so you can also change the columns that you want. So I can go to the choose columns here, and I can say that I don't want my comments column. Maybe I don't want my movie column either, so I just untick those. There are other ways to get rid of columns as well. This has imported it with the time. This I want to say is some numbers, so I can just sort of select the data type, and I can make this either date, time, or date. Using just date is best. And then I've done all these transformations to my data. And when I'm done, I can just load this into the worksheet. So I can click close and load. I can choose close and load to, and I want to load that to a table. And let's put this in the existing worksheet over here, just next to the rest of my data. And it is showing me there. Now, this is Power Query in a nutshell. But what you're doing is, rather than creating formulas or rather than creating manual steps, you're actually creating the set of rules that can be reused. So to showcase that, I'm going to change some of the data. So I'm going to say that this applies to a new sponsor. Let's say this is Fanta, like Coca-Cola. So now what you might expect is the fill down will end there and end there as well. But I can do some other things. So I can also add a new column. Yeah, so I can say this is an extra column, and Power Query will know to remove that. I can also sort of add some more blank rows anywhere in the middle. Doesn't matter because I'm just filtering them out. So I just go in here and I press data and refresh all. This refreshes everything, not just Power Query things, also pivot tables and other things. And effectively, Power Query will run the background queries, and eventually it will load it. And there you see I have Fanta, and the other stuff has been kept more or less the same. So that is a sort of simple run through of Power Query. But let me go back and make some more edits. So if I click on this second table, I can either go to the query and then edit it there, the new query tab, or if I want to, I can just sort of open from the queries and connections tab. This automatically pops up when you load a query, and you can just double click that to open it. Then goes back into the query editor. Let's do some more transformations. Let's do some text-based stuff. So I want to transform this and make it uppercase. And maybe I want to add a column where I click on both of these columns and then choose to merge a column. And then I could say there's a separator custom with a space dash space. This is going to be company dash city. Press OK. That's the name of the column there. So yes, a lot of Excel formula people often think, well, I mean, I don't need Power Query to do this. I can write the formulas myself. And I absolutely agree with you. And for that reason, I myself didn't use Power Query the first sort of 6 to 12 months that I knew existed. I didn't think there was anything that special about it. Yes, I can combine these things. Yes, I can change the data type. Yes, I can uppercase it, but I can do that with formulas. However, there's some stuff that you can't do with formulas. And that's something that I'll show you a little bit later. The other thing that's really great about Power Query is on the right-hand side, you have the applied steps window. Can't see that right now. Okay, it's not showing. That's unusual. Sure, it's in. I can manipulate that in the options. Display the query settings. Yeah, that's normally on by default. Kind of strange that it's not showing up right now, though. So over here, you have all the steps that we've done. So we filled down. So that is the one to get from this to fill it down. Then we filtered the rows. Then we remove other columns, change the type, uppercase, and inserted a merge column. Now, what's really great here is that you can go back at any point in time and then make some changes, drag things around, steps, or add in new steps if you want as well, as I've shown you there. It's a really good audit trail. I know accountants love audit trails. This is such a great one, especially compared to using formulas. As I load it, it gives me the new things that I put in through here. So, as I was saying in the build-up, now I have used, I had been using this and been aware of Power Query for a while, but I didn't think it was that important until I eventually came across this thing that it does called unpivot. Now, let me show you. Yeah, let's do a kind of simpler version of unpivot. Let's say this is some cities here. And yeah, let's just do some feedback like that as well. So here I have some data, and we'll do the more complex one in a little bit. Now I can select this data. I can go to the data tab. I can choose from table or range. Press OK. Doesn't like the merge cell, so it's going to call that just column 1. That's okay for me. This is something that I'm going to get rid of anyway. So first I'm going to select my columns. I don't want to keep this one, so I'm just going to choose columns again and untick column 1. There are other ways that you can get rid of columns as well, like remove columns or remove other columns, but that's the one I tend to use the most. Now I want to go from columns into rows like I had before, and I have this thing called unpivot. So I can select these 4 columns, go to transform, go to unpivot, and there's basically 3 here. For good practice, I recommend using the last one or the middle one if you're going the other way, but the first one can be problematic. So I'm going to do unpivot only selected columns, and that goes, as I said, from columns into rows. If I go back 1 step, I had 15 rows, 6 columns. Right now I have 60 rows, 4 columns. I can rename these. So this could be month, and this could be sales, like that. And this is now enabling me to do the unpivot command that I showed you before. So when someone showed me that I could do this with Power Query, that is the first time that I saw the value in it. Because there's so many times where I've had to manually unpivot by copying and pasting without even knowing what the step was called, that it was even a thing to unpivot it. But once I saw someone do it, I just immediately knew that this is going to be a feature that I love. So I'm going to load that. It can load by connection only, or I can load it to the worksheet. Let me put it underneath there. And there you go. So yeah, so this is unpivoting it and allowing me to change the way that I want to do it. Now I started off this by saying, Power Query makes data cleanup be fun. And there are some kind of troubleshooting things that can happen if you want to fix something more complicated. So this is kind of a table which has multiple rows for headers. And what I can do is I can click on it, and I can now, I'm going to get the data in a slightly different way. Before going here, I'm actually going to type in the name box and give it a name, like that. Doesn't matter what the name is, but what that enables you to do is grab it from a table range without converting it into a table, so you don't screw up your merged cells if you need those. So here we have our data, and what we need to do is we need to combine the fact that our first column, that we have data on the first 2 rows, that needs to be our column. So there's a lot that you can do for some more advanced Power Query stuff using transpose, because this enables you to perform column level actions on rows and row level actions on columns. So you can click on both, and then you can sort of merge the columns. Let's say that this is sort of a dash like that. And now this is now where my columns are. Now I can transpose it back, and I can go into my use headers as first row to promote the headers there. So that can be a really cool way to sort of bypass that. And then I can unpivot these 4 columns the way that I showed you earlier, which is using unpivot only selected columns. However, if you are worried about there being May, June, July data, etc., you can always select the columns you don't want unpivoted, and then choose unpivot other columns. Because what that means is that eventually the extra months will unpivot as well. Then I can, from here, I can go to extract text after delimiter, and I can take everything after dash and space. And there I have my months kind of quite nice and clean. So that's a more complex unpivoting that comes from a multi-row header that can be quite useful as well. Something that you end up using a lot with forms. So if you use Microsoft Forms or other kind of applications to grab data, you often have repeated columns like this, and you would need to unpivot them so that you can do any kind of analysis within them. All right, let's go into combining tables. So VLOOKUPs. VLOOKUPs are used a lot by advanced Excel people, but they do have limitations. So for example, here, you can use a VLOOKUP to look from this table into this other lookup table to extract the price per kilo, and then a formula can give the price per kilo times the quantity in kilos. And VLOOKUP has been indispensable. In fact, it's the third most used function in all of Excel. However, it has its limitations. So it often needs many formulas to work. As you drag it down, there's always one formula for every row of data, which can be very messy. It doesn't deal with duplicates, and it only looks from left to right. There was a new thing released last year called XLOOKUP, which sort of fixes the last one, but it doesn't fix the others. Nowhere near as good as VLOOKUP, as Power Query. Power Query allows you to merge queries in the ways that databases do. So instead of having a query that just returns the same number of rows, Power Query enables you to return a different number of rows. So this is database speak, but you have left outer, which imagine this is all the rows on your left on one table that you want to merge with all the rows on the other table. So Power Query left outer is like VLOOKUP that will return the same number of rows as originally. But you can also have full outer that returns rows that are in the left but not the right, but also rows in the right but not the left, or left anti. This is so useful. Returns only the ones that are in the left table but not the ones in the right, or an inner join that returns only the ones that are in both tables. So left anti, this is a very, very common issue with Excel data. How can you find the rows that are in list A but not in list B? So to show you some demos of that, over here I have two pretty simple lists where I can see that I have A and D are only in this table. B is a duplicate. B and C are in both of these tables. F and G are only in the table on the right. So VLOOKUP wouldn't fare very well with this. VLOOKUP would only return this. It doesn't know how to deal with a duplicate for B. It just returns the first one. And it just gives you the 4 rows, which is the same number of rows in the first table. With Power Query, you can return a full outer. So you can say, I want A, B, B, including the duplicate C, D, E, F, or an inner join, only the rows that exist in the 2 of them, B and C, or left anti. This is the one that I use the most. I love this. Give me the ones that are only in one table and not in the other. So let's go through how to do this. Effectively, you need to load these up into Power Query. I've already done that. So I can go to my data view, queries and connections, and load up this query editor. Then on the left-hand side, these are my queries that I have here. So VLOOKUP 1 and VLOOKUP 2. This is the ones that I showed you. I've already just preloaded them. Now what I can do is I can click on this and go to home. I'm going to merge queries and merge queries as new. And I can say, for example, I want to load this one with this one. I just click on the two columns where they match, and it tells me the selection matches 2 of 4 rows from the first table. We already know that. We already know it's C and B. But I can change here. So I can choose full outer. So this one, if I press OK, this will end up loading all of this. And if I extract the name, untick that, it gives me a different number of rows. However, I can go back here and I can click on the cog to edit back to that step. And I can choose not a full outer, but a left anti. I never really use the right ones because then I just change my tables. If I want it to be right anti, I just do this and then this. So it doesn't really make a difference too much. So I'm going to choose a left anti and press, select the columns I want to join, like that. You can even select multiple columns if it came to that, actually, which you can't do easily with VLOOKUP. And here are the 2 entries that appear only in one but not the other. Again, because VLOOKUP is live, if I press close and load, and it's not loading because I've set it to not load for the purposes of the demo. But if I add in another one.
David, there's just a question. Could you zoom out a little bit so people can just see the bigger picture?
Okay. Yeah. So is this okay now? Yeah. All right. So I've added in another row for P. And this one obviously doesn't match the other one. So if I go back into my query, I would expect the left anti to give me the letter P there as well. I'll show you that in a sec, but before I do, let me load up these 2 tables, because another very common issue with Power Query, in Excel, is being able to match something that is misspelt or written differently. For example, is Brian the same as this Brian? Is this the same person? Very possibly it is. Maybe this is misspelt. Maybe Sydney is the same as Mr. Sydney. Maybe it's the same as Mr. Sid, etc. We don't really know. So I'm going to just load both of these into Power Query, select it, and go from table arrange. And then I'm going to close it because I need to get this one back. So the second one from table arrange. By the way, that's a setting that I highly advise doing, that when you exit the Power Query editor, it doesn't load every table. You can change that in the settings, options and settings, query options here. I'll send you a list of how to do the preferred options there rather than show you now. So I've got fuzzy 1 and fuzzy 2. I want to take the fuzzy number 1 and I want to get this person's email address. So what I can do is I can go merge queries. I'll do it within the same query. And I can say that I want to merge that with fuzzy 2. Click on the name. And it says it's matched 2 out of 7 rows of the table. So I press OK. And I can expand that to the name and the email. Untick that. And I see that it's only got these 2. It's not very, very good. However, Power Query applies to the laws of time travel. So if you affect the past, it does affect the future. So if before I do that, I go back in time and I say that actually I want to sort of do a replace values. And I know that I have made a mistake. So I want to replace Brian with Brian like that. Press OK. And like we know from the superhero movies, if you change the past, you do actually change the future. So now we've got that to work. But what about the others? So what I can do is I can go back to this merge queries, and I can use fuzzy matching to perform the merge. So fuzzy matching is a type of technology area that tries to match based on a threshold. So if I leave it blank, it does it to 80% similarity, but I can put, for example, 0.9, ignore upper lowercase, and ignore spaces as well. I can also put a maximum number of cases or make a transformation table. For example, you can match USA to United States, etc. It doesn't work, it's an error. That's because they need to be text values. This one needs to be a text value, sorry. Yeah, there we go. So there you go. Now it's matched a lot more. It's managed to match Brian with Brian like that. And if I wanted to change the similarity threshold, I can get to even more matches. So I can say this is now going to be 0.5. I have a full YouTube video going through all of this in all its glory, because it's really quite a useful feature. If you like that feature and you've come across that issue, then let me know in the comments. All right, whistle-stop tour of Power Query. I know I'm going fast, but Power Query is a huge beast of a product. So I'm just kind of scratching the surface. You can also get data from external as well. So I showed you, you could use the from table or range, but you can actually get data from lots of sources here. You can get data from another Excel file, from a text file, even from a PDF. This just got released last month. From a folder, I use this all the time. I actually showcase this at the Power BI talk, so I won't show it now, but you can combine data from different spreadsheets in a folder quite easily, or from databases, from Azure, from Power BI. That's a new feature last month, or other issues there. So yeah, a couple. Yeah, one more transformation that I wanted to show. Let's do it here. So let's go back to edit.
David, you have just been asked of how do you get data from a PDF, and how does that work? If there's any time for that in a minute.
Yes, okay, yeah. I don't have any examples though on hand, so it's a little bit tricky. I can showcase it though. I just won't be able to point to the feature.
Thanks.
So yeah, so let's say we want to add a column that's a conditional column. There's all sorts of things here. I can't go through all of them. I can add a conditional column. And this is kind of like writing a very complex if statement without writing a single form of code. So I can say this is maybe type, and then I say if company equals Honda, then good. Add clause. Otherwise, if date is before, choose from a date picker, choose a relevant date like that, then average, and then add clause. If city contains, I mean, I can do all of this with an if formula, but having to write a contains as a clause in an if formula is so difficult, but I love doing it within Power Query, EA, then great. Then add clause if sales is less than 40,000, then bad. Otherwise, check for error. Press OK. And I get all of this. And once you've created that, it's super easy to just sort of move things up and down, which when you're talking about if formulas is so difficult. When I teach my corporate training course in Excel, I show them how to write the if formula manually, and then I show them how to do it in Power Query, and they love the Power Query version. Again, it's so much easier to write complex formulas. You can also, if you want, go here and go to the date column and extract the age. An age formula in Excel is very, very difficult. This is in days, not very nice, but we can just change it. In transform tab, we can choose duration and get the total years, and then round down. Now we have the age. Really, really simple. And it's dynamic. It keeps updating it. So there's a whole load of things within Power Query that are really great to use. To explain how much I actually use Power Query, despite being an Excel guru, I probably spend about 30% of my entirety of Excel time within Power Query nowadays. Power Query is also in Power BI in exactly the same format. So it helps you move into using Power BI as well. Yeah. Okay. Get data from a PDF. So data, get data from file from PDF. You kind of just navigate to where that PDF is, and then it can sort of do it. You probably need to do some cleanup stages. You can even get data from a folder of PDF files as well. Unfortunately, I don't have a sample to show with this, and I wouldn't say it's that great, to be honest, but it's definitely a start to be able to grab it from a PDF like that. And the feature is just released. It's going to be enhanced very soon.
David, is it available in 365? Or will it be?
Data from PDF, yeah. This will only be this is still in pre-release. It will only be in Office 365. Yes, correct.
Shortly.
Yeah, shortly. Yeah, yeah. But it's already in Power BI. The exact same feature that uses Power Query to get data from PDF exists in Power BI. So if you really want that feature, you can download Power BI desktop app for free. And the Power Query feature is exactly the same as it is in Excel.
Okay, that's really
cool. Released years ago in Power Query. Okay, so I've showcased that. Just close off with my summary. So data cleanup steps. The unpivot command, I think, is just fantastic. Remember you can review your steps and go back in time as I showed you. You can combine files from a folder, or you can combine tables in different ways. And if you make any changes, you can refresh it and it takes in the new data. It's in Excel and Power BI, as I explained. Final quote, you never needed Power Query until you used Power Query. Genuinely, everyone I know that is using Power Query will agree with me on this statement. And yeah, finally, I'm David Benaim. You can follow me on Twitter at Dave Benaim. That's my YouTube handle. I have an entire playlist of videos just for Power Query. That's how much I use it. Great. All right, and I'll put that in the chat. So I'll end there. Any questions?
I just wanted to add, thanks, David, as ever. I mean, it's a whistle-stop tour for everybody, but don't forget this has been recorded, so it will be uploaded to the website shortly, so you can revisit parts of it that you want to take a bit more time on. And I'm sure, as with many of these things that's supported by David's YouTube channel, there's so much information on there. David mentioned a few times Google Sheets. He's a great fan of Google Sheets, I know, and we were wondering whether to do any exploration of that. So your feedback on whether you use it at all, whether you'd like to use it, because I know there's a lot of instances where it's far more powerful than Excel, and that's not from any experience I have, that's from David's comments. So your input as to whether we explore that would be really useful. And any other topics that you'd like covered in the coming months, please don't be shy of letting me know. So David, thank you ever so much again.
I have one closing comment, actually. So 50 of the world's Excel experts, including me, are getting together in about a week and a half, and we're going to do 53 hours of non-stop Excel. So wherever you are in the world, it's going to be non-stop Excel. And this is all for charity, so we're all doing it for free. I'll put a link for how to subscribe to it, so please feel free to check it out. Everything's going to a COVID relief charity. So if you love Excel, then please feel free to join. So it's called Excel Virtually Global, organized by a friend of mine who lives in Australia.
There's one last question that's cropped up from Satola asking, how much time do you need to get to handle Power Query professionally?
So my training courses, I tend to do about 8 to 12 hours of training, which is a day and a half. And then generally people can be pretty good. It depends what your current Excel knowledge is. If you're someone who is very proficient with pivot tables and VLOOKUPs, then you're going to pick up Power Query super fast, because you're going to be like, this is how I do that thing I know already. But if you're not as good and you don't know those features very well, then I'd say you sort of need to learn the concept before anything else. But yeah, there's lots of good tutorial websites out there. There's a book I can recommend if you're interested in learning it that really helped me get over the edge of learning Power Query. But I'd say about 8 to 12 hours of training and practice, a lot of practice, and you'll be good to go.
Whilst I know some people are starting to disappear, but we've had some positive comments about Google Sheets, so thank you, Clive. And there's also a question, is the explanation of the combination of files from a folder on your YouTube video?
Yes. I do have a video that is devoted exactly to that. So
okay, cool. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us. Thank you, David, once again, and we'll see you all in a month, if not before.
Yes. Yeah. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. It's Maxine. If you can close the screen down, please. And I know you're there somewhere, Maxine.